This is the chapters 8 and 9 lecture. This is a very big unit, so be sure to get started right away, do your reading. There is a lot to cover. At the same time, will make a special effort to point to test questions as we go through the lectures. In Chapter 8, we discuss water-soluble vitamins, but before we do, it's important to note the difference between the water-soluble and the fat-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K, and the water-soluble are all of the B vitamins and vitamin C. Whether the vitamin is water or fat-soluble does tell you a few things about it. Fat-soluble vitamins are stored, so you can eat them less frequently as long as your intake meets your recommendation over time, because you can draw upon stores. And yet, since they're stored, it's more likely or easier to reach the upper limit for these vitamins. I won't say it's easy. It does take some work, and typically you don't get to the UL without fortified foods or supplements. But in the cases of vitamin A and perhaps vitamin D, but mostly vitamin A, there have been some cases of individuals consuming vitamin A-rich foods and reaching the UL levels. B vitamins must be consumed more frequently, because with the exception of 2, they are not stored, and it's much more difficult to reach the UL. So the UL is far away from the recommendation. There is a huge margin of safety. You can look through these charts, which show you why variety is important, although there's some overlap. Often students, especially parents, will ask me about their children and say, my child eats fruits but not vegetables. Don't they have the same nutrients? And you can see here they have some of the same nutrients, but vegetables are packed with more vitamins than fruits. Fortification certainly eliminated vitamin deficiency diseases that were a problem back in the day, but fortification also comes with some risks, and we'll point to those as we move forward. When you eat a lot of fortified foods, as mentioned, there is the chance of reaching the UL. This is the percentage of children consuming more than the UL for certain vitamins. So in the case of zinc, that's actually quite high, and even 10% of kids exceeding the UL for these vitamins listed is problematic. Read through the absorption of vitamins. Again, this is where the difference between water-soluble and fat-soluble becomes very important. They are absorbed differently, and they also travel through the body differently. Okay, so let's take a quick run through these water-soluble vitamins, highlighting some things that I believe are very important and you may see on the test. To start off, it's important to note that B vitamins are coenzymes, which means they act with an enzyme to make it active. And you see the function of a coenzyme here, absolutely essential to the enzymatic function. When we look at this pathway of energy metabolism, and you see the names of B vitamins in these little squares all along the pathway, that indicates that those B vitamins act as coenzymes in the pathway. So the energy metabolism pathway is facilitated by B vitamins as coenzymes. If I asked you the question, do B vitamins provide energy? The answer would be no, because vitamins don't give you fuel, okay? But can you feel tired when you lack B vitamins? The answer is yes, because these pathways don't run as efficiently. So very often, deficiency symptoms for B vitamins are fatigue. Let's get started. When you see a title on the slide, that is how we'll refer to the vitamin. So even though thiamine is B1, I will use the name thiamine in the lecture and on the test. Very important for energy production, and always know the deficiency diseases. In this case, beriberi is a deficiency of thiamine, and the Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is a deficiency of thiamine in alcoholics and some other disorders as well. Do make sure with this slideshow, especially, that you click into these links afterwards and listen and read, because some test questions come from the links. Very serious disease, as you could see here, and a problem for over 1,000 years in East Asian countries. However, in these little case studies, what I do is I bring in more recent examples of deficiency diseases. So you can see it's not only a historical problem, but as a nurse or a dietitian, you may come across individuals with these deficiencies. Riboflavin, another B vitamin. Good sources are some vegetables as well as some animal sources, and milk, dairy products are a very good source as well. Riboflavin is important for the citric acid cycle, and it's easily destroyed by heat and exposure to light, which is the reason that milk doesn't come in clear glass bottles anymore, because that destroys riboflavin. The deficiency disease is called ariboflavinosis, and the hallmark of the deficiency of riboflavin is a swollen tongue and cracked lips and corners of the mouth. Read about a case study in the case study file. Niacin, another B vitamin. Niacin is very unique in that we can make it from an amino acid if you have enough of that amino acid in your diet, and you can see that right here. Be sure to read over that. So you can get niacin both from niacin itself, the B vitamin, and also the tryptophan. The disease a deficiency of niacin causes is called pellagra. Be sure to read about pellagra here. Pellagra is known from its 3 or 4 Ds, so dermatitis, diarrhea, and dementia, and we can add death as well. The dermatitis is very unique in that it forms a pattern where light hits the skin. The skin becomes very irritated and rashy. Read about it in the file. Now this shows you the number of deaths from pellagra and how that changed according to flour enrichment. So you can see as a public health intervention that was very, very successful. Niacin has been used in the past to treat high blood cholesterol. There are some cautions about it because we're seeing that niacin also increases blood sugar, and that may explain the increased risk of death with niacin use. Also notice that some forms of niacin cause capillary dilation and flushing when you get too much of it. So too much niacin can cause flushing. Pantothenic acid and biotin are 2 other B vitamins. Read the case study for sure. That helps you learn and remember. A couple of things about biotin I will say is there is a protein in raw eggs that destroys or actually binds biotin. So individuals who eat a lot of raw eggs can become biotin deficient. You have to cook your eggs. Eggs are a good source of biotin, but you want to denature that avidin. Vitamin B6, unless I tell you otherwise, you don't have to know all of the forms. Some of you may be interested and want to read further about that, however. Important for a whole lot of different reasons, but deficiency can cause anemia and neurotransmitter issues as well. Not the best picture of deficiency, but deficiency does cause a greasy, flaky dermatitis, as well as weakness and irritability. Interesting thing about B6, I told you with the exception of 2 vitamins, B vitamins were not stored. We in the past believed that water-soluble vitamins could not cause the toxicity because any excesses ended up in the urine. What we have since found out is that vitamin B6 is stored in the muscle. And this came about from some studies on B6 and premenstrual syndrome. Women, upon hearing the results, the positive results of this research, ran out and started taking a lot of it. And some of them ended up with permanent nerve damage. So B6 can cause problems. It's hard to reach the UL. You can't do it with food only. But you can get there with supplements, so you have to be careful. Folate or folic acid, folate the natural form, folic acid the synthetic form. Very important for DNA synthesis, very important for pregnancy, and we also know it breaks down homocysteine and seems to lower the risk of heart disease as well. So a low folate intake has been associated with an increased risk due to the amino acid homocysteine. Food sources are lots of veggies, whole grains, and we have food fortification, and this came about because of what we know about folate and birth defects. This shows you the pathway of breaking down homocysteine. So you see here B6, B12, and folate break down homocysteine. Homocysteine is an amino acid, but in high levels, it seems to irritate the linings of the blood vessel and begin the injury that begins the process of atherosclerosis. Folate deficiency causes a large cell or macrocytic anemia. Many of the same signs as any anemia, but very different under the microscope. So big cells that have a hard time dividing. And we also know that women with low folate, without enough folate in their diet, have a higher risk of having a baby with a neural tube defect such as spina bifida. And this was really the reason that folic acid was added to grains. Vitamin B12 there's so much on vitamin B12, so let me mention a few things here. It is found in animal products, so vegans need to be careful, make sure they get a food that is fortified or a supplement. You need acid to absorb it, so individuals such as elderly people, where it's very common that acid decreases, may be prone to deficiency. And you also need something called intrinsic factor. We'll look at that in just a minute. It's a glycoprotein made by your stomach that is essential for absorbing B12. So pernicious anemia occurs because of a lack of intrinsic factor. We're worried about excess intake of folic acid masking B12 deficiencies, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. So here you go. It comes in bound to protein. You need acid in your stomach to release it. Elderly people or those who are taking antacids then would increase the risk of a B12 deficiency. You need cells in your stomach lining to secrete intrinsic factor, so people with a stomach injury or for an unknown etiology for not making intrinsic factor are at risk as well. Read the case study. B12 is really interesting. What is so interesting about B12 is there are two stages, this might be a simplification, of deficiency. First, the anemia. Then, after a long period of time, horrendous nervous system damage, some of it irreversible. The nervous system damage gives symptoms which look like dementia. It's not Alzheimer's disease, but B12 deficiency causes things like falling, lack of coordination, forgetfulness. So an elderly person without enough acid in their stomach who misses the anemia, and this is where this slide comes into play, could develop those long-term nervous system defects. It occurs because of a demyelinization of the nerves. So that's what happens with a long-term B12 deficiency. So how does folic acid come into play? You need B12 to activate folate. Okay? Inactive folate from food becomes active folate. However, if you're getting folic acid from food and supplements, it's active and you don't need B12 anymore. In the case of a B12 deficiency, what you should see is a folate deficiency anemia occurs to warn you or get you to the doctor. But if you're getting enough folic acid from food and supplements, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get that warning sign of the anemia. And that's what was meant by can mask B12 deficiencies. Vitamin C is ascorbic acid. It's not a B vitamin, but it's water soluble. It has a lot of functions that are listed here. Helps maintain our immune system. It produces collagen, so very important for healing, helps us absorb iron, and it's an antioxidant. So here's collagen function, and read about antioxidants for sure. Now, the early symptoms of vitamin C deficiency come from a breakdown of the collagen. Collagen is a glue that holds your cells together. So things like little hemorrhages under the skin when a bit of pressure is applied, or bleeding gums show are symptoms of early scurvy. Read the case study. You can reverse this easily. If it goes on too long, it can be deadly. We in this country usually catch it, reverse it. But back in, centuries and centuries ago, you can read about the history of vitamin C deficiency. Large numbers of sailors would die because of a lack of vitamin C. Okay, as far as the fat-soluble vitamins, there are 4 of them. I'll let you read through this. Remember to read over your slides again. Vitamin A is interesting because we can get it from a precursor in plant foods or preformed in animal foods. We usually get about half and half unless we don't eat animal foods. Very important for a number of functions here, and you can see that it's important for night vision, cell differentiation, growth, also your immune system as well. An early sign of deficiency is night blindness. Look into that. And this is the vitamin that probably, although it's not common, is the most common of the vitamins to become toxic. There have been cases from people eating lots of liver or some fish fat that are high in vitamin A. Not fish oil supplements, by the way. They don't have vitamin A. So read the case study, read about night blindness, important for the vision. If you don't have enough in your bloodstream, you don't have what's necessary to replace the bleached out pigment when light hits the eyes. Important for gene expression, so making sure the cells become what they're meant to become. And without that, you will have keratinization of your body linings. So body linings that should be moist and slippery, producing mucus, become hard and dry. The lining of the eye becomes brittle. This is something called xerophthalmia, which causes loads and loads of irreversible cases of blindness each year globally. Okay, so here are some sources from animals. And here are some sources from plants. So those dark greens and oranges tend to be higher in vitamin A. Beta-Carotene is the second antioxidant that is vitamin related. Too much beta-carotene can build up in your fat and turn your skin, your palms of your hand, if you have lighter skin, perhaps your face, a tinge of orange. This is not harmful. It is something that the beta-carotene uptake by the body is limited, so it can't cause a toxicity, and to reverse it, you just cut back on the beta-carotene. Too much vitamin A, by the way, and I might not have mentioned this, actually does cause a toxicity that can be quite harmful. Vitamin D is called the sunshine vitamin because in certain conditions we can make it from sunshine. It can be produced in the skin by exposure to light. It's very important for bone health and more. This little one has rickets, and you can see the bones are soft because of lack of calcification. You need vitamin D. Of course, you can make it from sun in order to absorb the calcium needed to keep your bones strong as an adult and to calcify them as young ones. So rickets is the disease in children. Osteomalacia is the disease in adults. There are a number of reasons for a resurgence of rickets. We don't get as much sun, and neither do our babies, and many of those are good reasons. Doctors tell us to keep our kids out of the sun. More breastfeeding. Breast milk is notably low in vitamin D, so breastfed babies should get enough vitamin D. I don't want to make a blanket statement. If the mother gets plenty of sun, her breasts or enough vitamin D, her breast milk may be adequate, but most doctors do supplement breastfed babies with a liquid vitamin D supplement. There are a number of things that can get in the way of production of vitamin D from the sun, such as smog, being inside all the time, clothing, glass windows, darker skin. So vitamin D is a common deficiency. So keep that in mind when you look at your diet. And remember, with the eye profile, you're not diagnosing deficiencies. You're just looking for patterns. You're looking for inadequacies. So here are the animal sources, something that you'll be surprised about because we've been led to believe that if we drink milk, we're just fine. Most of us don't get much vitamin D at all from our diet. It's quite difficult to do so. When you complete your homework, you may realize that. So take a read of the case study for sure. Vitamin E and vitamin K, they both affect the blood, but in different ways. Okay, so vitamin E is an antioxidant. Its absorption depends on normal fat absorption. You'll see that with the fat-soluble vitamins. You absorb them more efficiently with fat. So if you're on a very low-fat diet or if you have a disease causing fat malabsorption, that can cause a problem. Vitamin E deficiencies in newborns causes a hemolytic anemia. And as far as its effect, it must be on a slide coming up, on the blood, too much vitamin E can thin the blood and cause over-thinning of the blood for someone who is on blood thinners. Food sources, it's an antioxidant, and here we go. So it interferes with blood clotting and can enhance or make greater the effect of anticoagulant medications, and that could possibly cause bleeding. One of the things we'll learn about supplements is that you need to be careful because they do have effects physiologically and sometimes can interact with medications as well. Vitamin K is involved with blood clotting and, by the way, bone health as well. It's synthesized by bacteria in the intestine. We get about half from that bacteria, and it is given to newborns because they have a sterile digestive tract, and therefore don't have enough vitamin K for blood clotting, be sure to read. I think this is a video really interesting for future nurses and dietitians. Toxicity is rare, but for those on anticoagulants, it can be problematic because it cancels out the effect. For everyone else, by the way, vitamin K has no UL, and research shows the more you consume, the healthier you are, the longer your life. Vitamin K and blood clotting, these foods are so healthy, so don't get scared and avoid vitamin K. The interaction is for those who take anticoagulants. Read the case study. Okay, and we talked a little bit about this already. I just wanted to briefly mention phytochemicals, although I'm really interested in them. Functional foods are foods that have health benefits besides nutrients. So we're seeing all sorts of great things from them. Phytochemicals are these substances in plants which are amazing, not only as part of the taste and flavor and colors of the foods that we eat, but also in terms of their biological activity. So please, you won't be responsible for the specific phytochemicals, but make sure to read about the research, because that might encourage you to try to increase phytochemicals in your diet. And read through this chart for sure. You may see a question on this in the future. Watch your video bites. And then finally, it's just kind of a branch off from phytochemicals. The last part of this lecture, I wanted to mention nutrition and cancer risk. I think we've received the message that lifestyle is important, but perhaps not how important. Please look through these links, because we now clearly see that there are things that we can do that will lower our risk for cancer and lower the risk of our patients who have cancer and have recovered from a reoccurrence. I've linked this up so much, but it's important that we know how to advise our patients. And I think this message is finally, being passed around. Being a healthy weight, being physically active, not consuming too much alcohol, these things are all important. To understand the relative risks, this is a really nice infographic from the UK. So certainly smoking is your greatest risk. But when you're looking at the other pieces of a lifestyle, keeping a healthy weight, drinking less alcohol, eating lots of fiber, those are right up there, aren't they? And with regards to the alcohol, we've been convinced by the industry that it's just fine. In moderation, it's just fine. But now we're seeing that's not the case. That in moderation, it does increase the risk for cancer. So for some people concerned about cancer, drinking rarely or occasionally, if at all, might be the best idea. So please do look into these links. You will see test questions on nutrition and cancer, but more importantly, cancer is a disease that is kind of running neck and neck with heart disease as the #1 killer of Americans. We need to be accurate in how we advise our patients. Thank you.